Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the City of East Providence City Council Budget Workshop meeting this evening. Again, I repeat, it's a budget workshop this evening. Today is Thursday, September 8th. May we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the United States, to the Thank you. I see we have the deputy chief here. If anybody has an objection, we can start off with the start off with a roll call, please, before we begin.
Yes, sir. Councilman Cahoon,
It's on his way. He should be here shortly.
Councilman Morato,
Yes.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Here.
Councilwoman Souza.
Here.
Council President Brito.
Yeah, thank you. Again, as stated, the deputy chief is here from the police department. Considering that he is here, you wanna go for, are you here for? Okay, you wanna? Not exactly if you're here for, let me just get this.
It would be Animal
Shelter and Harbor Master. Oh, okay. Just make. For those of you following us along, Animal Shelter is listed on page 100, and the Harbor Master is listed on page 103. You may proceed. Budget went from 341 to 380. Questions from the council?
Nope, just the increase from fiscal budget 21-22 to 22-23 really comes with the part-time position that you guys are hiring into. So that's 2 now. Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Any other further questions? Okay, you want to go on to the Harbor Master? Page 103 for the Harbor Master. Any questions from the council on the Harbor Master budget?
Pretty level funded.
Question?
None.
That's it. You're good. Thanks. Hey, Joe, are you doing capital as well? No, okay. I see Leslie here. Anyone have any objection? Emerson? Leslie? Are you following along with us? We're on page 24 for canvassing, page 24 for canvassing.
Do you have any questions of me?
Any questions from the council?
It's a pretty significant, decrease. What was the reason for that? Is that no longer using the part-time?
Well, we don't have the 20 grand or 29,000 for redistricting that we had before budgeted. I went from family plan to single plan. Longevity came down. I'm sorry, but I kind of have an accident last week and I haven't really had a chance to look over the budget.
I think a lot of it probably had to do with we were going into an election year and there were additional expenses because of the election year that it wasn't an increase. So I think that's where the overall increase probably,
No, it's a decrease.
no, from last year. So it decreased because we no longer incur those expenses for an election year.
My question is, my only question would be, is that enough to operate?
Yes.
I don't know. Questions. Thank you.
You all
I
set?
don't know the-
Oh,
Set?
Set.
you're good?
Set. Thank you.
Feel better.
Yeah, we'll wait. Planning? Mr. Faz, you all set?
Try to get you out early since you're here late
there
all
we
the
go.
time.
Go, okay.
Mr. Mo? Yeah,
Page 57, right?
page 57, those of you follow along. The Planning,
So in brief, there is a budget increase of 85,000 overall. 66,000 of that is attributable to salaries. I think in the budget, what Malcolm and the mayor have done is taken some of the part-time salaries, wages, and moved it into permanent salaries. If you look at the FTEs at the top, we never really had a full-time administrative assistant funded in the budget. So I think this budget makes this a full-time position. So that does cause an increase in that line item. I don't think the department's had a full-time administrative assistant since pre-budget commission days. So that's a significant part of the increase. The other increases are pretty much along the same lines with longevity, the contribution to the pension, health insurance, deferred comp. I did offset some of the increase by reducing the professional services line item by $10,000 to try to keep the increase as minimal as possible, but everything else is pretty much flatlined.
any questions from the council?
Compared to other municipalities. People in Sauk. It's close to ours. What, do you know the number of, employees in their planning departments?
No, I honestly don't know. Yeah, some municipalities have planning within the zoning combined, and it's in the building inspector's office and all of that. Like, Pawtucket has a separate planning department, same as Providence. But I don't know the exact full-time equivalent. One of the things that I know that isn't, a lot of folks focus on the large scale developments that are happening in the city, but along with that, we do a lot of small development analysis. In the last 2.5 years, we've done 50 subdivisions, which is a lot of work, to do a subdivision, to coordinate that, everything between the engineering and zoning and all of that. And what that does is it creates 50 buildable lots in the city that normally wouldn't be allowed to be built on. So that does create some of the small scale development that we like to see. It tends to lead to more affordable units because the lot sizes are lower, 5,000 square feet or 7,500 square feet. So, it seems like anybody who's got a buildable lot in the city, by right can come and subdivide it and, build a house on it. And I think that's good for the community.
Are those all are going to zoning for variances?
Well, yeah, some of them have to go to zoning for variances. Some don't require any relief because they have enough square footage. They have enough room for setbacks and frontage and all of that. But I would say probably half of those have to go to zoning. I think it's a good thing that, if you were a homeowner and you bought a lot, maybe 30, 40 years ago, and you had a side lot that was available to be built on. Maybe that's something that, a number of these I know have been subdivided for family members to build next door. So I think that's a good thing we like to encourage.
What was the number you said? 50?
Yeah, over 50. Yeah, I don't know the exact, but from 2020 to 2022, it was over 50.
No further questions, Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Faz.
Great, thank you.
Recreation, anyone have any issue with community service recreation going up? Ms. Diane? 59, for those of you following along, page 59, recreation. Good evening.
Good evening, hi. Okay, recreation, we're pretty much staying the same. There's slight increases, the most of which in our temporary salaries for our part-time staffing in order to keep pace with the minimum wage increases and to hopefully attract and retain some of our personnel, especially drivers and skilled instructors and things like that. Our recreation counselors and supervisors. Yeah, just some minimum increases in technology. We were adding a cell phone for our staff that supervise and instruct offsite. And there's an increase in our rec desk permitting system of $300 a year. So
What is that last part? And what? What is that?
I'm sorry?
What was the second one? One was the cell phone and the other one's what?
the rec desk permitting system, which we use to issue permits and for the city facilities.
Questions?
No, Diane, it is recreation that issues permits, correct?
Yes,
For
sir.
like fields, almost any source that,
Yeah, right. All the parks and playgrounds and in athletic fields, yes.
How about PS Field? Do you have, or do you want to report on PS Field as well? Or is
Um,
that part of your?
No, Pierce Field is under DPW and the whatever revenue generating is issued is detailed in the budget report.
And I just have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
On supplies for cleaning, I see that last year and this year, there was the same amount, $2,200. What do we not have custodians that come there to do? Like, I'm not understanding why we have a cleaning supply line.
I'm sorry, the question was that we're not spending on cleaning supplies or?
What are we using like, is there a custodian that's stationed there?
Yes, there is maintenance staff that is assigned to all the public buildings, but each department is responsible for paying for their own cleaning supplies. So we've kind of been piggybacking with the senior center, because we occupy a smaller space, but that was one thing that we're looking into. I need to pony up a little more in cleaning supplies, so we share in those costs. So there's cleaners to wipe down, the equipment and tabletops. We need paper towels, lots of, disinfectant, obviously with the children and the seniors, and trash bags.
So that accounts for the senior center also.
No, the senior center is pretty much paying for the lion's share of that portion. So, we should be paying a little bit more, but recreation occupies a, much smaller space of the building. So I don't know if we're kind of like taking from their stockpile, but,
I'm all for being, cleaning. I just
Mhm.
I just haven't noticed that on anybody else's line item that they had to pay for cleaning. So
yeah.
So that just threw me off to see that here. Another question I have, this might be more for Malcolm. So on here, we have a line item for our fireworks, the wonderful display that we have been doing over the past few years. But it was my understanding that the monies generated from Ballpoint for concerts were supposed to go into this department to help fund things such as fireworks and any other stuff in the recreation department that we were going to be needing. And I don't see where it might, it's,
Yeah, there's money set aside. We get, I don't know, 10, 15,000 maybe a year. We've got, I forget exactly how much, I want to say 30, 40,000 maybe that we've put in there. It's for, it was also for DPW, I think it was like Parks and Rec or Parks and DPW,
It's
so.
for, City. I didn't know when any of that, funneled to public television. Improvement of parks, fertilizers, whatever was needed.
I believe some money that's generated from Bold Point also went to that one year, didn't it? The fireworks, ticket sales or something like that, a percentage.
Well, that's what that's the donation that they use so much off per ticket, actually, but, that funding has not.
but that percentage is supposed to go to your department.
No, well, it's supposed to go to the maintenance. Parks, so-
Oh, in parks
yeah,
in
the
general.
parks,
Okay, okay.
Any further questions? Thank you.
That's it? Okay,
set?
thank you so much.
All right. Senior Center? Good evening.
So my overall budget, I have an increase of 3.4%. And the majority of that 3.3% is going towards increases for my part-time staff.
On page 70 for the senior. Oh, is that additional staff?
No. So it's giving increases to them.
The minimum?
So some of it is minimum wage, as well as just trying to keep up with, trying to maintain the staff that we have, drivers, kitchen staff, and such.
Questions?
Are you fully staffed now?
We are fully staffed right now. I did write a grant and we received it for a community health worker for 2 years. So we're in the process of hiring for that position, but right now we're fully staffed.
No other questions? From me?
No other questions? Thank you.
Okay, thank
Second
you.
Thanks.
second harmless.
General question, President, if I may. Malcolm, probably best to answer. Are we seeing, looks like it's a substantial decrease in health insurance benefits? I mean, I'm seeing it in this department. Thought we went up across the board.
Yes, every year we get a analysis from the trust and they tell you how much your health insurance is going to go up. I think this year was 5%, 5.5, I thought. So health insurance should, it may go down if you lose an employee or employee goes from family to single, but overall.
Okay. And if we're looking at a department with not so many employees, you may see that change.
One person could be, you
Got
go
it.
from family to, I don't need health insurance, that's a $20,000 difference.
Got it. Thank you.
Malcolm, since you're up there, I have just a quick question and I don't want Diane to come back up. On line item for Winterfest, there was the spend out half year was 15,000, and last year we allocated 6,000. Did we just shift monies around in that department to pay the 15,000 out?
Yes, normally what we do is it's a sort of a bottom line budget. So you've got so much to spend for your budget. So if you have surplus in one area, you can spend it out of another. And then we'd look at it at year end, like when we do the budget and say, you know, oh, you were over. Was there a specific reason for that? Or do we need to actually bump that up and maybe transfer some budget from line A to line B? But we really don't do budget transfers unless it's from, excuse me, one department or one division to another.
Right, no, within the same budget, but changing line items. So if one line item has a surplus, then you can plug into another line item that doesn't have enough.
And I just say, and I don't want them to be putting it in the line item where there is excess funds. Because, you know, no, put it where it should be. And then we'll look at it a year in and see, we need to adjust the budget for next year. So you'll see some lines that are over and then some that are under.
Okay, thank you.
Carousel, is Ms. Johnson here? Good evening.
Hello.
Page 66. 64.
Page 64 for those who are watching. Page 64. Begin.
So, as you know, I'm Tracy. I'm responsible for the historic carousel in Riverside. I believe the only increases to the budget are seasonal staff. We made increases to try to retain the staff that we have and try to bring us a little more current with where minimum wage is going. And then we had some basic increases too, I think like water and electric. But I'm frugal, so we stayed the same across the board everywhere else. I always like to remind people the fees and maintenance line really is not maintenance. It is all of the things like the alarm fees come through there, all of the inspections we have to have every year, cleaning supplies, which is why we don't have that line. But my budget's pretty much the same with the exception of the increases in the part-time salary.
How many part-time people work at the carousel?
Currently, we have, I believe 9 and myself.
So when the carousel wasn't open, were we still paying those employees?
No, those are seasonal employees. Year round, you have myself and I have a part-timer who during the winter time helps me do all of the programming for the following year, as well as assists the recreation department with any needs that they have in the senior center.
So is that part-timer, whose budget is that person in?
Mine.
But on the FTEs, it only has a full-timer, doesn't have,
She's listed under the seasonal staff.
oh, under the pot, just lumped in together.
Any other questions for Ms. Johnson?
How many other questions? It looks like you're pretty level funded, except for those minimum wage increases and a couple of things. We can't let you sit down without saying congratulations on getting this latest stage up and running. You are, I guess you're the face that has made the children smile across not only the city, but the region. It's been going swimmingly from what I see. And you had some new staff. The training appeared to go well. So I guess your fingers are crossed there, but it's working well. But seriously, you know, while it was closed, you were doing a lot of work. And I guess there's a little more to do, but we're almost home.
I like to say we're halfway there. We've done the underground. Now we need to do the above ground. There is a capital request when you guys are ready to talk about that. But I want, if you have just a moment, I just wanted to share. We opened the first weekend of August, like August 6th. We have already done close to 10,000 riders in a month of just being open on weekends. And that's running at less than half capacity. So when we get to complete phase 2, I think things are just going to be all the more better for everyone who visits. Lines have been long, staff is new, but they are doing great. The customers are all very patient and we're getting through it. We're doing very, very well. It's being open 1 month.
When do you anticipate full capacity ridership?
After phase 2.
Okay, so like you say, we're halfway there, but it's good. There's no danger of running.
No, so,
this-
and that's an important thing. Nothing is broken. Everything we have done has been preventative. Fix things before they break. It will cost you less money and take less time. The next phase is for the center and top bearings. Those are showing signs of wear at 127 years old. Could we ride full ridership right now? Yes. But we will probably wear the bearing out that much faster, and we would have to close and wait until funding is available to get it fixed and up and running. But everything we're doing is preventative.
I think that's very wise. And the people that I have talked to and that I've seen comment on that, at first they asked you, why are there so many rides that appear to be available? And as soon as they're given the explanation, they agree 100%. Let's not permanently ruin this treasure. So thank you for all you've
Thank you.
done.
And Tracy, you may recall that when you were up here last year presenting the capital budget to do exactly what was done, I was skeptical I didn't know that would be enough funding, right? I thought that we were looking at a bigger job, and I asked you and you said it was enough. And I asked you when we would open, and we opened pretty much exactly when you said. So I want to acknowledge that fact and let you know what an outstanding job you and everybody else involved has done. So thank you very much for doing what you said you would do.
It wasn't easy, but it was definitely worth it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is anyone here from Enterprise Fund, wastewater? Malcolm? Are you? Napoleon? No one's here? Jim Marvel. Malcolm, you want to come up and?
Front of me, but on the enterprise as you know, in water and sewer, the revenues that are generated, the rate is set by the council. And usually it's set for a period of a few years. So the revenues are set. And the expenses are mainly our salary and benefits. And so besides salary and benefits on water, you do have, we've got 2 or 3 big line items that are capital. But yeah, I think they both went up just a little bit, not a lot, mainly just to do contractual raises. I want to say they went up 70 or 80,000, one went up 30. But the water and wastewater, they're an enterprise fund, which means they're separate from the general fund and they're supposed to run like their own businesses. So they're supposed to pay for all their expenses and collect all the revenue, where DPW and engineering and tax collection, they collect and help everybody out. But we have to bill water and wastewater a portion of their salaries because it's supposed to be run like a business. And so those are pretty much 2 standalone companies that, but the only thing the general fund does, it'll pay the payroll, payroll comes out of the general fund. And then water and wastewater would have to reimburse the general fund for payroll biweekly amount. Besides that, they collect their own revenue through tax, pay their own bill. So, a lot of times people say, how does that affect the general fund? It really doesn't.
Any questions? No questions? Malcolm, you want to stay up and start with your department?
So, Mr. President, when we get to the meetings later on, when the actual budget will be voted on, there'll be wastewater representatives here, I take it, or someone,
Jim Mob will be here too.
I think so. I think it was just maybe a miscommunication because Dan was here the first night, the DPW director, and he was here on Tuesday, and I think he thought that he was done. Because he'd already been here and presented twice. So on 260 finance,
Let me get the page. Is that?
You guys need director Borges here. I'm gonna hold
You don't need it. No, he's got the end of the day off. We don't need it. We're gonna continue marching.
Want to get a hold of him, see if he can make it?
What is he gonna talk about?
Pierce Stadium, one of the issues. I don't think you guys covered all the DPW.
Yeah. Is there anything in Pierce Stadium that any questions about?
Covered all of DPW. We didn't cover Pierce, and
Right.
Jim Marvel would be the water.
But is there any questions that the council has regarding Pierce that we need him here?
I honestly, I think that can wait. Yeah, for next time he is scheduled to be here.
Well, if,
I need to call him. No.
yeah, I think it
if you
could wait.
finish tonight, there wouldn't need to be another session, so it's up to you guys.
But if we need that, if that's the only thing left, we can just add that to the next.
Council meeting, right?
The next meeting's on the 20th. I don't know if that time frame.
October 4th, right? No, actually.
just to clarify, these are workshops for the council so that you can ask the departments questions. You can ask as many, or you don't have to ask any. If you're like, we don't need to do that. So once we've gone through this, then we'll set up a public hearing, which is a little more official where you can make changes in the public. hearing.
That's what I'm referring to. We'll have time later.
Yes.
But thank you for,
Have to approve the final budget within 7 days of the end of the fiscal year. So you have till, I think it's about the October 23rd to approve the final budget. So you've got, another 6-7 weeks to have as many public hearings or workshops as you want.
Right, but if we are going to propose an increase to any particular department, that needs to be advertised.
Yes, you have to have another. Yes. So at the first public hearing, you can make recommendations. This is what I want to increase. But then that has to be posted in the paper so the public can come, so that at the next meeting, then you would vote on that. Sort of a two-step, kind of like a ordinance.
Got it?
So for those of you following along, we're on page 27.
Since we're on that topic of making those recommended increases, when is the absolute date for that? The advertisements?
It's October 3rd.
So it's the October 4th meeting, and that's our next council meeting, regular council meeting.
No, our next regular council meeting is September 20th.
Okay, I'm sorry.
And then the next budget session, if needed, would be September 14th. You guys are to report any increases by the 3rd. So I can't advertise.
On the 20th,
That-
we're making suggestions. There are any for increases?
That sounds reasonable and correct, I think. Yeah. So we can be prepared. That's, as Councilman Morado just said, I think that's a good milestone for us to sit on. If we're going to make recommended increases, let's be prepared to present them at that 20 September meeting.
Okay, so with
Make that a docket item specifically.
So with that being said, if you want to have a public hearing on the 4th with the regular council meeting, we can put that advertisement out on the 20th, and
Yes,
if it's,
10 days.
If it's a no-go, then I can cancel that on the Wednesday morning and we can revisit it after that. Because my advertising has to be in Tuesday by noon. And I have the opportunity to cancel on a Wednesday morning. It has to hold the ad space. So with that being said, it could work on the 20th. As long as everything's a go, I can keep it in. If not, I pull it out because it gets published on a Thursday. So then we would have to wait we'd have to do a special meeting outside of regular council.
Okay. So be ready on the 20th and we're good.
I'll have it ready and prepared and shipped off. Malcolm and I, who's good with that advertisement. And
Ad is, we'll have the ad. I think if.
Yep, you always have it ready.
State,
for me.
we've been going back and forth. I think that should be approved in the next couple of days.
Yeah.
That's what's going to go in the paper.
Mhm.
So, let's just say we'll have it in the next 2 or 3 days. I don't know how long it takes to get in the paper. We're looking at 15 days, and then anytime after that, you could go ahead and schedule a public hearing now. You could either discuss it at the next council meeting, your changes, or you could do it at the public hearing. It's at the council's pleasure. In finance, you'll see that it looks like a pretty big increase. It goes from 753,000 to 887, $133,000 increase. But the two main reasons are for that is that last year the council had recommended taking the maintenance for the accounting system, which was $83,000. In the budget last year, they said, take it out of capital. And so it really belongs back in the budget, so I'm bringing it back in the budget. So that was normally in there years past. It's $82,727. And then the other one is the more of a reallocation is the $25,000 for the OpenGov software, which we moved back into my budget. So that's 108 of the 133. The rest are all contractual changes. Besides contractual, the only thing that went down was dues and fees, and that went from 1,000 to 600. Now there potential savings. We have 2 vacancies. It depends on who you get, step they come in, whether they have, as the councilman referred to earlier. Right now, I've got a family and a single budgeted. You don't know what they're going to come in. You know, if they come in and neither of them need it, you could save $30,000. If they both come in families, then it's another 10,000.
Can you explain that professional services again? That increase, that line item?
Yes, there's the 2 things that were in there previously that was the 12.5 was we have an audit done every year on the wastewater budget because we have to bill Barrington a portion of that. So after the audit, we send it to them so they can verify that the numbers look correct. And the other one is $5,000. We do an actuary report for the pension. We also have to do an actuary report for the OPEB, other post-employment benefits, your health, your dental, life, whatever you get when you retire. And so that's 5,000. So that's 12,500. 2 increases are the accounting system, which is about $83,000 a year. And the OpenGov software, which we're trying to get up, is 25,000.
So Malcolm, going back to your earlier comment, I thought we had pulled the accounting software. I thought we had put that in capital because that was the initial purchase. I agree that maintenance, right, licensing, maintenance, everything else. I agree that that belongs in the regular budget, but we had pulled out the initial purchase for capital, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then, okay, so OpenGov and, all right. Are we paying licensing fees on those? I imagine that we are on both sets of software.
We didn't buy either. It's more of a SaaS. So we're just leasing it. And the accounting software is 5 years and OpenGov was 3 years.
And it's all web hosted, right? I mean, we're not putting any of that on local machines.
So if it's leased, it's an annual
Yes.
cost.
Yes,
And it would still be just in the budget, not capital at all.
correct. And that'll show up every year from now on.
But that line item, 5,300, purchase professional services. So where did that money, what other line item what department or line item did that come from?
Well, the large one, the 83,000 wasn't in the budget last year.
Correct. You said you removed it. The one that was, last year was 12,000. This year it's 120,000. And you said that that money was moved.
The 83 was not in the budget. The 25, I'd have to go track and see where that was at for the open gov. I think that was in,
So that professional purchase of professional services, that's a new increase.
yes,
And what's that for?
that's the two I told you about for the purchase professional. There, the two additional ones are for the accounting software and the open gov software.
The 120 is going to go towards the accounting software.
Yeah, 80 of them.
You know what I think what happens, Malcolm, is on the first page, it gives a summary.
Okay.
And then on the second page, it breaks it down further.
Gives
So
you
it
the
almost
detail.
looks like it's two different,
Oh, okay.
so I
Yes.
think that might be what.
Somebody came to me earlier today and said, something's wrong, because they said purchase professional. And I'm like, but that may be 3 or 4 different items. So you first see them and they're grouped by category, then you go down below and they give you the detail.
And the number doesn't match. So on the first page, where it just says under this category, it's 123 or 27. And then when you break it down on line item 53,000, it's 120,227. So the numbers don't match from page to page. So that probably is another area of confusion.
I'm looking now, I've got a different printout, but for the current year, what is it, 120,227?
Well, that's what it has on the breakdown here, but on page 28, that's the summaries. It's 123,427.
And I believe that it pulled in what I'm thinking it's the postage number,
Is that what it is?
because that would get you to 123,427.
Yeah, I think that's, like I said, I think it's the breakdown on the second page. It doesn't necessarily, if you're not looking at the bottom line. Okay, thank you.
Okay. That's you.
I don't have any other questions. It's fine.
Malcolm, he's choking on your budget over here.
I know, exactly.
Yes. In tax collection, there is a minimal increase. You go from 554,000 to 559. It's a $4,764 increase. The salaries and benefits are going up. The offset is under purchase professional service went down. That went down $39,000. And so that offset any increase in the salary and benefits. Besides that, there's a little bit more money, 1,500 went to general office, $100 went to technology software.
Why the decrease on that purchase professional?
Uh,
What changed from last budget?
We haven't been sending people to collection, COVID and everything going on. We were getting collection fees. We were sending tangible and motor vehicle. So we put a hold on that for now.
Where's the revaluation? Where's that
It'll
accounted?
be on the next budget.
Anything else on the tax collection before we go to assessment? We can continue. You want to note any major differences in assessment?
No, again, there was an $8,000 increase from 656,000 to 664. Salaries have gone up a little bit. You'll see in there under purchase professional service, the 130,000 is for the statistical revaluation. I think that came in actually about 146.
47 is the number I have in my head, but yeah. ballpark.
And we knew, and so what we did is we had money left over from the current budget because we had done most of the revalve for the current year, and then we stopped. So we didn't spend all that 150, so any additional money we'll need for the current one, we'll reserve out of the current year budget.
How much is that?
That-
On the current budget, the money left over.
I don't have that in front of me. I can get that for you. I think that there's, I want to say maybe a third of that left, $50,000. And by far, that's the biggest ticket item in there. Besides that, you've got the technology software. You've got, mainly that's their assessing software, their camera software, their web hosting. And that only went up, went up $1,400.
I don't have anything. Anybody else have? Hang on 1 second.
Oh, I'm good. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. The human resources, is that Director Gonzalez? Will you be covering that? Okay.
Good evening, everyone. As you can see, overall, the budget went down in HR by $22,000 thereabouts. And that was due to a position that we had funded both in EOC and HR, which we eliminated. Open to any questions you might have.
Was it eliminated or just vacant?
Thank you.
It's vacant.
It was part-time in EOC and part-time in HR.
What's the status on the HR director itself?
Oh, we're hoping, after the beginning of the year, obviously it was difficult to attract candidates right now. With what time frame. So we're hoping to post it in January.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you. Council President, we're on IT.
Ms. Kelly?
Good evening. Good evening. IT budget is at $697,808.48. A couple of changes. You'll notice
In the salary line, we do have a decrease, modest decrease. That is for the position that we're titling Communications IT Specialist. That will be noted is in the new budget or the new communications line item for an IT person to be assigned to the new dispatch/communications center. And so that's been a bit of a change.
What's that total?
So the total, let's see here. It's $18,000 decrease in the total budget.
So
So-
that's an $18,000 position? That
No,
would-
what they've done is they've taken the position that has been vacated in the IT department. And I'm retaining about 60% of the salary. And then the rest is being assigned to the communications/dispatch department
So
for,
18,000 was moved from IT to the dispatch communications.
correct. And that's to align to the costs, having IT support for the dispatch center. And then the other change is the hardware account for IT hardware. We dropped that to pretty significantly down to $5,000 from 15. And we will be looking to use ARPA and other grant funds as we can for IT hardware, computers and what have you. So that's why there's a decrease of that amount.
So let's talk through the hardware, right? So last year we had an increase in demand, well, really 20 into 21, an increase in demand for hardware, right, as we sent people home, right?
Correct.
And then they came back, so it's natural to assume that there would be some decrease in that. And then kind of strategically, are we moving more toward, I mean, we're always going to have a need for some hardware, but we're
So-
moving more toward like web hosted software as a service type stuff?
Yes. And one of the great benefits of the ARPA funding is there's quite a bit available for cybersecurity. So we've been able to go into contract for Microsoft Azure for all city server resources. So currently, like the fire department, we've already moved them over, all of their servers are over now onto their off premise and they're into Microsoft Azure. So we are moving in that environment. All city networks are going in that direction. So when we were able to obtain the funding for it through ARPA under cybersecurity, the belief is when we sat down for my budget that we would continue that path. I also received another almost $70,000 from the Secretary of State, again, for cybersecurity, for canvassing operations, and that's allowing us to upgrade the entire server closet, Cisco switches and what have you here at City Hall that are fairly outdated. So the goal is more of a grant funding first opportunity as we can for IT hardware. There is a capital request for computers. The last time we bought computers for City Hall and other, anybody but the police department was 2013. So we would be looking at just replacing people's desktops because we still, we do use desktops and laptops. We're not fully working from home and all that. When we purchased for COVID, we bought laptops. But we've found that, engineering and others, they do need a desktop workstation. So we do have that. You'll see that in the capital request. But because that was just significant decrease for hardware, I just wanted to explain that's where we were looking to get the funding. It could be ARPA, it could be enterprise if I need to work with the water department, and if it's the police department, we usually use Google.
Too.
So are you finding, is it also reasonable to assume that transitioning more from locally hosted services to
Yes.
software as a service,
Yes.
we're basically farming out the expenses for, protection, right? And, cyber
Yes.
attacks and things like that, right?
Yes.
Which makes sense because those are getting more sophisticated and frequent.
Yes, to keep up with it. We are using Azure for government. So, and there will be nothing really left here physically other than network switches and firewalls here on premise. So I would say we should have that done. I'm starting to work on the police department this week. By the end of the year, I would imagine all of it will be up in the cloud.
Much of what I've heard about, making the decision between Azure versus Amazon Web
Right.
Services. It's sort of like a 6 on one hand, half a dozen on the other. Is that what you found too?
I found it to be the same. We played around with both platforms. And just in my experience, I felt more at home, if you could, in Microsoft Azure, because that's been our experience is the Windows environment. The cost was very good. And we've been very pleased with the service from them. So, the whole city will be moving in that, like I said, we're already under contract for all of those, every single network to move forward into Azure. I can't think of, the only thing that will be staying here, Nate, would be surveillance systems, things of that nature.
Closed circuit.
Yeah,
type
anything
stuff.
closed circuit that, like for the police department, we don't put that into the cloud. The access and control systems will still be here, but your average file server, print server, any of these application servers are being migrated. And it's great for us. It's tremendous to be able to get a call anywhere and you can log in, take a look. And it's been also great for our vendors that support our software. If a problem, it's no longer, they don't need a handoff from us. They're able to go in, do what they need to do, get us back up and running. So
And
I've been really
disposal,
pleased with
right?
it.
I mean, we save on all that disposal. We're not chucking all that plastic and stuff.
No, yeah, right. Electricity, air conditioning, UPS, all of that costs a lot of money. We've experienced outages with buildings that are not up and running, generators that are having issues. So that's going to eliminate all of that for us. So it's can be, I can't delineate it in the budget, but it's a tremendous savings and it's putting us in the right place where we need to be.
Just got to
So-
make connectivity good.
And there's that whole internet's up, needs to be up all the time. So everybody's been great to work with, but that's the changes in my budget, just a little bit of a change in the salary and where that went and why. And just more of a grant first opportunity for purchasing hardware.
Any other further question? Thank you, Ms. Ava.
Thank you.
Okay. What do we have next is want to take care of the mayor's office as well? I apologize. I thought you had taken care of that during HR.
As you can see, the mayor's office stayed level funded. A little bit of a increase this year by $7,000. And that was due to some salary, minimal salary rate. Questions?
Any questions from the council? No questions from the council?
Thank you.
Thank you. You have anything else while you're up here? That's
I
it.
do not.
That's it. Very good. Malcolm, are you all set with everything?
We talk debt service.
Well, I don't know if Malcolm, you all set with everything? Okay.
All right. Yeah, I'd love to do that if we can.
Which one are we on? Service?
That's the only one Malcolm's got left, right? Is debt service.
Yeah, I'm not sure who's miscellaneous and capital.
Oh, yeah, we won't get the capital.
So debt service is our biggest increase. Went from 12 million to 15.6 million. It's a $3.6 million increase. The bulk of that are the two bonds that we took out for the high school. As you recall, instead of getting one big bond, we took some of it out that wasn't reimbursed by RIDE and we ran it through the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank. So we got a low interest loan there. And so that went up 1.4 million. The Rybeck went up 1.3 million and the high school bond went up 1.3 and the one through the infrastructure bank went up 1.4. And the other one in there is the TIF bond for 900,000, but that's budget neutral. I wanted to present that because I think it should show in debt service, though. The way the TIF bond works is we send bills out to Kettle Point, they pay it, then we send it to a company and they do their analysis and they say, okay, then you've got to transfer so much over into this restricted account, pay the bond. But again, I don't like showing things off the books, so I talked to the mayor and I wanted to bring it back in. So there's also a like increase on the revenue side, so it's revenue neutral. It just shows here. And besides the rest of them, you know, they go up a little bit, down a little bit, depending on how the interest and principal work.
I get your rationale for wanting to show the TIF bond in debt service in the budget as a line item. I'm just not sure I agree. Malcolm, talk us through the alternative. Last year we showed it, we had it as a line item, but we showed $0 and we tracked it where?
It's with US Bank. And so the money gets transferred to US Bank, it shows in there. And, but, so it's tracked. It just, again, it's sort of like a lot of the grants. You don't see all the little grants that we get. And so since this is a debt service and it was a rather large number, I'd like to show it.
And your revenue, your accompanying revenue line shows up where? on our
Just
budget?
under tax collection.
Okay.
Because all the bills just get sent out and they say, well, of that, we need you to transfer 900,000 into this restricted account, and then they'll pay the bond.
And when you discuss the increase in the amounts, the budgeted amounts for the various, the high school bonds, right? The increase from those primarily, really wholly results from the timing of the bond, the timing of the payments. Did we have graduated payments on those, or is it just you're seeing a couple of them come in at the same time, or how is that working?
I think on the infrastructure bank, I think it was maybe interest only the first year. But
Okay,
after it's the first couple of years, we, depending on how, you're not going to get reimbursed from RIDE until it's substantially complete. So you try to find a way to push off some of that expense. So a lot of times we'll do interest only for the first couple of years. But I think after this year, it's pretty level funded. I know for the high school, it's very similar up until like year 17. There's a big, and then it goes down the next, for the next 10, 15 years. It's been $20,000, 9.6 million is about average.
and then presumably when the reimbursement rolls in. Now, I think people need to remember the reimbursement percentage that's associated with the high school. The total reimbursement is something like $100 million. That's in the ballpark. 16 of that was provided up front. That was part of the pay-go money, so that the project could get started. So the total reimbursement that's going to come in is going to be less that 16 million. So the total reimbursement that's due to the city is somewhere in the realm of about 80.
Yes.
And I would imagine that when that reimbursement is realized, there is going to be a discussion about perhaps doing take another look at that loan, right? I mean, the choice for the city would be to pay down the principal of the bond, right? Or the bond loan, or to refinance. Right?
Well, and the way they've structured it is just like the debt service payments are very similar year after year, we're going to get the same amount of housing aid in year after year to cover that portion of the debt service. And so, you're like, well, that's 2.7 million, but we're going to get, say, almost 2 million of that back in housing aid. So I was trying to explain to Sarah, I said, we need to increase the budget somehow $1 million to cover the bond. And he kept saying, but we're going up 2.7. Yeah, but then you got to look at the offset on the housing aid. So the net effect is about $1 million.
I see what you're saying. So you're not looking at a lump sum. You're looking at, they're going to assume that portion of the debt service from substantial completion through the payment of the bond, right? Is that what
So
are you looking at a lump sum reimbursement from the state, or are you looking at, you owe this much in debt service, the state is gonna pay its
That's true,
prorated
because
share?
they give you a percentage of your principal and interest.
Got it.
So they try to match up our expenses. So we don't get a windfall.
So does it go directly to the city or the bond itself?
No, it comes back to the city.
It does come back.
And so you'll see in revenue a big jump in housing aid.
That's how it'll show as housing aid. I guess that makes sense. Like, it would be housing, yeah.
And we would normally get 1.3, 1.5 every year in housing aid for the old bonds.
We would expect that money to go towards paying off that bond, right? Reducing that payment.
Yes.
That's all it.
And I think you asked this question, Councilman, but, when is the school scheduled to be complete?
So the school is scheduled to be substantially complete. The last thing that needs to be done, I'm trying to go through my head in sequence. The last thing that needs to be done, I think, are the tennis courts. I think there's probably a question right now. There's a race between what'll get done first, the softball fields or the tennis courts. But you're probably looking at the work being done October-ish. There are a couple of things that need to be closed out on the punch list before all of, we've got, withholds on a lot of the subs, and some of those have been closed out and returned. But we'll have to go through the entire punch list and officially close out the contract as well. That'll probably take some months after the completion. There are a couple of projects that are outstanding. One is that one light pole that's right in front of the school that needs to be moved so the drain can be upgraded as part of the project. But getting that pole moved it's like an act of God to get it done. So you'll probably see this project continue into the next calendar year. And then we can start talking about, all right, we're at the done kind of closeout phase.
So by the next budget, there's a potential to see a huge decrease in this in debt services.
I'm not 100% sure how they're going to allocate that. I imagine our offset budget years are going to impact us as well. But the way that Malcolm just laid it out, I think that it's reasonable to expect that we would see accompanying revenue to start paying back against our bond number in the this is FY 23 and the FY 24 budget, right?
It was substantially complete as far as RIDE was concerned in September of last
The building.
Right.
Right. But I'm talking about the overall project, right?
year. So we're starting to get reimbursed now.
Oh, we have, but it's got to be a very small amount because
No,
no.
It's got to be
It's
for the
not full
interior.
reimbursement percentage amount, right? Because they haven't signed off on the reimbursement percentage of 74%. They're still giving you the 54.
I think it's 74.
They are?
From RIDE last Monday, I think it was. And they said, this is what we're calculating you're going to get every year for reimbursement.
May I have that when?
We
yeah.
all, because I'm interested in that
So
too.
what's the timeline? How many years?
For every year we have the payment for the bond, so 20 years.
20.
So the bond payments, say 9.2 million, and the reimbursement is close to 6 million. So, out of the 9, we're paying a third, the state's paying the way it works out.
The other thing that we'll need to consider when that project closes out is that project will close out with unspent funds. So there will be a return of, it's not going to be a huge amount of money, but it'll be a substantial amount of money based on our current projection, what the project looks like. There's the various contingency budgets that have not been expended. Obviously, the budget was 189.5, and then I think with the guaranteed maximum price locked in, it was somewhere in the realm of 185, 186, and it's outperforming even that. So there should be a significant return coming back from that. So maybe that'll be an opportunity to talk about refinancing that bond too.
So does the contingency budget go back to the owner? Or does
Well,
the,
The way that the so there's three sets of contingency. There's the owner's contingency, there's construction contingency, and then there's more, which I don't have the budget in front of me. So the last thing to get released would be the construction contingency. So that will all await closeout.
who does that go back to? Does it go back to the owner or does the contractor?
Oh, no, the contractor won't realize that. I mean, that's not a boon. That contingency budget, and I'll get you the numbers of exactly what the budget is so you can see every building. But that's part of the budget that's there to be expended in the case of a contingency.
Right, but if there's money left over in the contingency, usually in a contract, either revert it back to the owner in some
Right.
cases, or the GC gets to keep it.
No, that GC is not.
It's okay.
No, that's going to revert back to the owner. But when that happens, I mean, everything has to be closed out before we can start talking about that.
So then when will we see that, Malcolm, where will we see that in the budget?
Which one?
Once it's officially closed out and any leftover funds that get
Oh.
recovered?
That we'll have to wait and see. You know, we've got a bucket of money when there's additional amount. We'd have to get the bond attorney to make sure what we can and can't do with it. So I don't know if we can just dump in the general fund or if it has to go to pay down principal and interest, or I'm sure there's some legalese that'll tell us exactly what needs to be done.
Yeah.
We'll have to figure out exactly, when they're done, how much that money is and where it'll be.
Exactly what that is going to be is just conjecture at this point, but all of those contingency accounts are tracking very well. They're, we have not run into a lot of unexpected stuff, which is good.
And something to consider, we were talking, the last council meeting, the school gave a presentation about the middle school. And the big problem we have with, the big cash flow you have with that is that we're talking, say, 3 years to get it complete. So how do you get funds? Because you got to pay for those funds and you're not getting reimbursed from RIDE for 4 years. So that's the problem, is that, you could spend that, debt service $3-4 million a year. Well, after 3 or 4 years, that's $12 million, $15 million. You could be in the hole, and then you're trying to tell the rating agencies, oh, we're getting a big windfall come the next year. So that's what we're trying to figure out exactly how we can do that. Can we break it into 2 smaller projects, a big project and a small one?
Although I don't think we necessarily anticipated that we would have that pay-go amount up front until well after we had the bond vote, we had the stage 2 approved. That $16 million that we got right at the front, I think that was somewhat of a surprise that they were willing to do that. So we'll have similar discussions this time. I mean, anything that we can get up front would make a difference.
Malcolm, I just have a question. Line item 5852-1 is a 24 million high school. Is that a previous?
No, that was when we talked to RIDE, they said you're going to get reimbursed 74%, but not on the total amount. And so there was $20,000-$30,000 that we're not getting any benefit from RIDE. So we said, well, where else could we get the money from? So we talked to the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank. If you go through them, you get a subsidized interest. So what we did is really kind of what we're talking about, the middle schools. We ended up doing 2 bonds for the school. One through Rybeck for about 140 million. And then the other 24 million through the infrastructure. We just did that because you could get a subsidized interest rate.
Yeah, RIDE's trick. So RIDE, there were certain elements of the project that they said from the get-go that they weren't going to reimburse. There were certain aspects of the field, for example, the size of the auditorium. We planned in a bigger auditorium than they were willing to reimburse, so they reimbursed us for a portion of that. Also, they don't reimburse for the total. What they do is they have a square footage calculation and they multiply that by the number of students that they say that, you're going to have, which by the way, we've already exceeded. And then they say that's the number, right? In that case, it was 136 million or something like that. And they said, we'll reimburse 74.5% of that number. So that's the reason for the delta that Malcolm was just.
So the bond was approved for 189, right?
189.5. Yep.
The build is somewhere a little bit below that 189.
Correct.
Well, we didn't take out the full 189, correct? We kept taking as needed, right? Kind of like in,
We took it out in chunks, Malcolm, but we took out,
Anticipation.
yeah,
So you did, instead of doing a bond, you do it like a short-term borrow, because I don't need to borrow 190 million, because it's gonna take me years to spend it. So we borrowed 70 million, and then we borrowed another $50 million. And then we went to bond.
and the reason why I'm asking that, so the jump between 2021, 2022 budget, that's 7.9 million to, this new budget, 9.5, it's because of the more money that we kept pulling to complete the project, correct? There was another
Well-
section of money that needed to be borrowed to continue the project, right?
Let me look into that, and I get you a better answer.
Because, all right, let me ask it differently. So from 2021 to this new budget, 2022-2023, there was more money borrowed towards building the high school, right?
Yes.
And that's why there's that difference in those two numbers.
That sounds logical. I'd like to do a little more research for it. on that, but
I'm just looking at it from a simplistic,
But we also have last year, we also didn't pay 1.4 on the 24 million. That was from the infrastructure loan, which we're paying in this proposed budget. So in this proposed budget, to both of rides and to both bonds for the high school that we took out split, it's going to be 10-6.
yes.
And then we're getting 1/3 back from the state, which is close to 6. But it's not reflected in this.
No, because when that comes in, that would be in the revenue section under housing.
And do you know what the potential first payment will be when that time comes from the state? The reimbursement? They're gonna
First
do in
payment
sections, right?
For this, I believe, is November 1st.
What's that, what will that amount be?
they do it in halves, don't they? They do it in November and April. They give us like half of the school aid and then half of the school. Isn't that how? Oh, no, that's how it goes to the school department from the city. It goes in biannual.
It is. My mistake. I was thinking of the motor vehicle phase out, which we get included. We get that twice a year. I think it's the same time. Get it like 10/31 and 30.
I'm talking about when you finally get the reimbursements from the state, do we know what the first reimbursement will be when that time comes? It's gonna be spread out throughout few years, you said the life of the loan, right?
I think it'll be,
Up to that 74% reimbursement.
and that's on that schedule that the state had sent me. And it tells you, the problem is they've got their fiscal year, which doesn't align with ours. So you've got to, it says you're going to get 4 million here and then 8 million here. Well, that's, you got to take half of this year and half of this year.
Do you remember what that number is, that first one? Ballpark?
I think we received 2.6 million.
We're going to receive, right? You haven't yet.
Motor vehicle. No, that's what I'm talking, that's motor vehicle. We get it. I think we get it this year and it's in October, it's 2.9 million, I think.
So shouldn't that be reflected as anticipated? So right now it's a 3.5 increase. Wouldn't that be anticipated as part of the, this budget where we're gonna receive this money on schedule? On this date, 2.9. So why would the increase be 3.581 from this year to next year budget?
Well, okay, well, but the expenses went up. So on the revenue section, that's where you have the offset.
Is a revenue section on this?
Not on this one, but I mean, in the budget, there's a revenue section. And I'd have to go find it, but in the detail, there's housing aid. And it'll show up on that section.
But that's gonna go towards general
Yes.
fund, right?
Yes.
So why, am I making any sense? Or?
Not, no, yes, you are, but not all of it, right? The housing aid is the lump that we get for all of, right, all of the schools. So the housing aid line isn't broken out for the bond and what we would normally get for the school.
But to back up, we haven't even, we have not received any money yet as far as the part of that 74% reimbursement. We have not received that yet because the high school isn't done yet.
We have.
So we have received some money.
We got 16 million up front to start. That was a pay, well, it wasn't a pay-go. They didn't give us 16 million, but they reimbursed all of the.
That went towards building the high school, correct?
Toward building the high school.
That number came off of the 189. That's the total bill.
Right.
So we can't even count that. Well, we can because now the loan that we took out wasn't 184 or 189. It was minus 16.
Yes, I don't know what the total amount that we took out, Malcolm. I'd have to defer to you.
So I said one for 70 million, the other for 50.
Right. Those were on the bands. And then we did two bonds, one for 24 million. Off the top of my head, I don't recall what the other bond is for.
My question is, I'll try to simplify it one more time. If we are anticipating getting the first payment soon for that, reimbursement, and we must know what that number looks like, right? And you said it was around 2.9. Why isn't that placed into this budget? This, as anticipate, I don't know how you want to word it, but instead of being 3.58 increase from this year to the new budget, it's actually less in reality, because we're going to receive that.
I guess what I could do is on some of the other budgets, the top section is revenue. So you'll see fire.
And that's considered revenue, that payment.
Right. And so under fire, the first two lines of the detail are revenue. It'll say rescue and something else for them. So it's like $2 million. Now, I normally have, since I get the money through the state, I normally have that up where I have my state aid. But on this budget, I could move it. I think I could move it out of, it's still revenue. It's still the same number, but I could show it on the debt service page. That's what you
Can you get us that sheet that you mentioned at
Yes.
some point?
send that out to them.
Well, I guess my question kind of is along the lines of the councilman's, because in the budget, it says that we're gonna get 2.4 in housing aid for the projected revenue. But that's the housing that we normally would get from the state, correct? Not in addition to specific projects.
No, because the housing that we normally get from the state is a huge number. That's a big one. That's like, whatever the school budget is, what was it, 90 million or so? 55% of that budget comes from the state and then comes into allocation. Right? And those are just rough numbers. So we get a lot of money from the state for the schools.
7 million for the state aid to schools. And another 500,000 for a couple other things. Yeah, it's like the school gets about 37 million. Then we
That
get,
goes to the school budget,
yes,
right, not to the city.
Right.
Comes to the city first. It doesn't go direct to school.
Right, but essentially it gets funneled back
Yep.
to the school and doesn't have anything to do technically with the rest of our operating budget.
Right. Only that it's revenue showing as housing aid.
Right. I'm just trying to figure out where the money that, and I guess you're gonna get back to us with that, where that payment is that we received for the first reimbursement towards our bond, and then what does it look like for the next fiscal year or this fiscal year current year that we're
Right.
in?
So if you go to page 11. At the bottom. Well, three up from the very bottom of page 11, it says school housing aid. We go from 5.8 million to 8.2 million.
Mhm. So you're saying the difference is what we're getting from RIDE because of the high school?
Yes. But it's also in some of the 22 numbers. Because RIDE said, we didn't get anything, it's gonna be confusing, for fiscal year 22 for RIDE. But RIDE said for 23, you can. But their first payment is in, say, October. Well, October is in our 22 year. So when RIDE gives the housing aid payment for the year, the first payment goes in our previous year and the other half goes in next year. So so that's why you go from 1.3 to 5.8 to 8.2.
But the takeaway is that housing aid number, all of the expected revenue coming in from both school state aid and the high school bond, right? The high school bond reimbursement.
Well, the housing aid is for really all the bonds that we've done previously that were associated with the school.
That's what I was trying to differentiate. So we have the school aid, which I know is a substantial amount, 38 million. And then the housing aid is what the title is for any monies that we're getting back from RIDE to compensate for any school projects that we've been involved in.
Yes,
for reimbursement.
And this is the bonds. So this is all for bonds that we've done previously.
Mhm.
And when the school, the way it works is with the school department, whoever pays for it receives the housing aid. So a lot of times, like previously, the school would do $2-3 million. So we'd see there'd be two housing aid numbers, one for the city, one for the school. But this number right here is since the city's paying for the bonds, all that housing aid is going to the city.
And the school submits its invoices for payment to the city.
Because we were getting copied on those invoices at one point in time.
Yeah, we were. There was an action that we took, it was a vote that I can't remember exactly what the action was. But the action was that we weren't just getting copied on them, we were approving them. But there was some vote that we took, and I can't remember what it was. We no longer needed, they're approved by the school committee and then submitted to the city for reimbursement. Or payment directly.
Any other questions for Malcolm? You want to proceed on down? You want to proceed on down, or you're done with,
I'm done.
that's the whole? Okay. So at the pleasure of the council, what's the intent this evening? Further, all it quits,
You have
Capital.
capital.
capital and city council, I
City
believe. Yeah.
Capital's gonna take us a long time.
Yep.
And we probably don't have all the people that we need.
Tracy's here. if You want to hear from Carousel?
Also out of the way.
All right.
Yeah,
Okay.
most of the people are not here for the capital.
That's why we have Tracy here. She just wants
Yeah.
to touch on hers so that we should have her back.
Yes.
That would be really nice, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm cool with that. If that makes sense.
Save
don't
you
have to
a
Come
night.
back 2 nights. Well, you don't want to come back?
It's all the way down here to the center of the city. Um,
It's honestly with I saw that item, it's the 150,000 to continue the stabilization. I don't have an issue with that.
Me neither.
Me neither. We can get an update.
Quick one.
Thanks for coming.
But now I have an issue with that.
Honestly, that's why I sneezed, just because I was really nervous. The request I submitted was actually for 300,000.
Is that in two parts, or is that another section that's not in the budget? Or is that for the same item?
My capital request was for 300,000. We do have plans to apply for a grant. I think that got confusing after the paperwork left me. Some people thought, just request the 150 because we're gonna try to apply for a grant, but to be fair, we need to request a capital improvement budget of 300,000. And if we're fortunate enough to get a grant, that would be wonderful. To schedule phase 2, which is the stabilization, the 2 bearings, we have to get on the calendar now for October of 2023.
Okay, can I ask, so,
Mhm.
Malcolm. Can we use opera funds for a project like this? This is a community, project, right?
I'm fairly certain we asked both Congressman Cicilline and Senator Whitehouse on that or the forum that they had specifically that question, and the answer was no. Somebody asked specifically about the carousel, and they came back with, yeah, that's not really the intent of this money. Now, again, there's a whole regulation that's written for it. I think it's probably worth a look, but my gut reaction tells me that answer was no, because it was exactly what it was. The carousel was part of our budget already, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that would require a deep dive into that reg.
I think that you go on their website, they have final ruling, they have all kinds of FAQs on that. And they have very specific buckets you can use.
IT,
Yeah, water, sewer infrastructure, broadband. It doesn't fit in any of those categories. The catch-all is that they've allowed you to what they call lost revenue. So they said because of COVID, we think that you may have lost revenue, and our budget normally goes up 2 or 3% a year. They've given you a factor, I think it's 5.2. So they said, okay, you use your 19, you increase 5.2 every year. And whatever years come in, that differential or that delta is what they call lost revenue. And they give you a lot of latitude with that. But the only things they don't let you use for that is to pay bonds or pension with that. But
So in the budget, we're supplanting 800,000 of upper money in different accounts, different
Yes.
departments for payroll. And so
Correct.
so we lost significant funds, right? Not being operational during COVID, whether it was COVID related or structural related. I don't see why it wouldn't pertain to this. Why we wouldn't be able to use the funds for this.
well, you can use funds to bring back vacancies that you had when COVID hit. And they said, oh, if you got vacancies that you weren't going to fill or that were vacant, we're going to let you get back to full staff. But
Let me ask, so first of all, I want to support whatever that carousel needs, but let me just ask, and I'll walk you through my thought process, right? Let's say opera funds, there's no way you can use it because of the guidelines, right? So, we did two increments of 150 each over a certain period of time for the blunt seafood shell and the ice rink. First, let me ask you just a short answer as to where that money is right now as far as where those projects are.
So the money still sits in whatever account it's housed in, or is allocated in. As you're aware, the cost of the building was astronomical. Hopefully you guys are all aware of that, and we have to prioritize. Right now, the priority needs to be, is for me, getting the carousel squared away. And then hopefully we can look at revisiting to building up the grounds, which includes the year-round clam shack building, an office and a garage and hopefully
So-
an ice rink.
So that's now 500,000 estimated because of the increase in construction materials.
$495,000.
So we're 200 short as it is for that project.
Right, and that 495 only gave us 4 walls and a roof. That's it.
So my thought process is a couple of things. Well, we know that there's over $6 million, if not more, in unencumbered past projects. And I think that we should look at that as an option because I really did. So that's an important key thing for me as far as, representing Riverside. That needs to keep going. Right? We came that far. We're stabilizing it. And once that main, component breaks, we're going to be out for a long time because that has to be specially made. Correct? That's a foundry, a special foundry that makes those. But anyways,
The carousel specialist who would be working on this project with me will take us start to finish, dismantle, remove, create, install, put back together. The concern, if you allow the bearing to wear to the point that it's not functioning properly, you could break other components on the carousel, which would then take this project from say $300,000 and skyrocket once you start having to replace crankshafts and oversized gears, tie rods and sweeps that will break. It's important to stay ahead of it breaking.
so my point is there's another 150,000 in unencumbered projects last year, the year before, and even probably 1 or 2 years even before that.
Correct.
So,
I
hold on,
believe,
Mr. Solicitor, and the council, what I'm asking is how do we start that conversation to say, because I don't want to increase this budget. Not by another penny, right? But I would like to fund that project with another 150. If that means cutting 1 or 2 of these this year's proposed capital improvement projects, or looking at past approved capital improvement projects that have not begun, and maybe we don't really have a need for it anymore, just for that 150. I don't know how we start that process or that discussion.
So the money for the Blunt building and the skating rink is sitting there. We know we don't have enough to do that anyway. Can't we use that money?
I would not, I prefer not to use that because once we use that money and we're getting close to fully funding that project, we'll never see that money again. And that is, and I know it's not your fault, but I was really hoping that that Blunt seafood component and the ice rink, but at least the Blunt would already have been built and functioning because that's going to draw a lot of people to that area of Riverside. It's going to be a benefit to the carousel in the long term. So I don't want to lose, once we lose that 300, it's going to be it's a lot easier to add another 200 down the road than to add 500 down the road.
Yeah, I would agree. And we have to add, right? Because that money is on, what did you say? 4 walls and a roof. So that's not going to give us a bill. It's not going to be close to what we need. So it can sit there, but we're going to have to add to it. What were the grant you was talking about that might have confused this issue?
The State Historic Preservation offers a grant opportunity that we can apply for. It maxes out at $150,000. Of course, we are not guaranteed that we would receive that grant,
Right.
and they have not yet announced when the grant application would be.
So that could be a year from now.
It would be within the next year, but my thought process is you have to have the funding to secure any grants, and I'm going to be looking at additional grant opportunities, not just the State Historic one, but none of that is guaranteed. And we have to get on the schedule to have this project completed at the end of the next season. We would need to get on the schedule now.
And the other question, if you had the 500,000 to build that Blunt shell in the rink, when could you start construction on that? What would be the time frame?
The last time I spoke with the lowest bidder, which would be for a prefab building, they were working 12 weeks out.
That prefab in the same design concept as what we had discussed in the past with.
Yes,
keeping up with
yep.
historic.
So it will be a prefab construction, but it is steel and wood, which is actually what increased the pricing.
So let
from
me
the
ask you,
Original 200 and change, all the way up to 495.
why wouldn't that be an ask in this budget? Being that, to me, that's an important component.
Because I have been told that the project is
The blunt seafood. So how can we move that project forward and make sure that with the, obviously, if you were to get that bond, sorry, that grant, that this money wouldn't be utilized, right? So, well, how do we move this forward? Because we've been looking at that blunt, and it's still on board, correct? They haven't moved anywhere. They haven't given up on East Providence, right?
correct. The last conversations I had with them is they are still interested when we can provide them a space that they can utilize.
So how can we move that project forward with, so it's really
I think, Councilman, it's.
350,000 is what's needed for the carousel this year.
It's funding the project. I mean, the carousel stabilization is priority. I mean, we can't run at full capacity. We're running at half, only on weekends,
Right.
or special events. I mean, that is one of the staples of our city revenue. I mean, I know the tickets aren't overly they're inexpensive, but we do a lot of other things there, right? Movie nights, and in the summer, there's a slew of things that could be happening and do happen, but if we were running at full, then there would be much more.
Correct.
Here's what I'm gonna do.
I think, and I
know
don't
you
mean to
knew.
cut you off, I want to finish my thought, Councilman.
I'm sorry.
I think that there are other things in this budget, in the capital improvement, though all are important and relevant. I think we've been funding a lot of other departments with things that we maybe don't need to do this year, or we can do it next year, that we can supplant the money into this project by trimming away something else. And though we don't, it's not, nobody's gonna be happy about that, but we have to prioritize some of these things. And unfortunately, not unfortunately, but the reality is the carousel is expensive repairs. It's just like purchasing a new vehicle is expensive, but if your department has had the luxury in the last 3 years of having 6 new vehicles in your fleet, and that cost, what will be what you need to do one stabilization or one part of your project. I mean, we have to make choices. We can't always be, I know it looks easier to give 6 vehicles to one department because it totals what your one ask is, but your one ask is really important also. And we have to consider that as a council and as a community because it does affect everybody.
Thank you.
So what I would like to do is this, and we've done this before, and I believe it's done through ordinance. I would like to, Mr. Solicitor, if you can pass this on to Mr. Marcello. And I know we have a certain time limit before this budget season's over, so I would like this done for the October 4th meeting or the 20th, September 20th. But I would like 350,000 reallocated from the unencumbered capital improvements projects to go towards the carousel in 2 parts to fund the remaining monies needed for the stabilization and the 200,000 to go towards the project, the blunt seafood shell. And I know we've done this before through an ordinance, an ordinance. And I would like to propose that for a vote for the 20th of September.
So before we proceed with that, I would just say that if we're going to do that, we need to know where we're cutting from, whatever.
So
Need to point those projects out. number one.
But hold on one second.
we-
So can we
What?
just run through the capital fund? Because I think Mr. Murato, regardless, I think, he wants the ordinance to come to us, right? The ordinance can be prepared.
right, I'm asking from the 6 million plus that is still sitting there from past projects that, haven't even been started yet. I'm not pulling away from, I don't want to pull away from these projects. I don't want to pull, I'm
Not
sure
taken
there's,
From these.
I'm not pulling from these, I'm pulling from the current budget, not the proposed one, the current budget's unencumbered capital improvement monies.
Well, I
Right,
want,
years old, not done stuff.
Right.
right?
Well, I would hold off on that as well because I got a project on there for Glen Light that has not been done or completed or even started, and I wouldn't want to take away from that. But more importantly, I want to get back to the numbers because I said this early on 2 years ago when we came up with 150,000. I said, no, the numbers, I think it's a little bit more than 150,000. And certainly it came in at a lot higher than 150,000. Where did the 400,000, 300,000, 450 come from? Do we have a quote? Or is it
Correct.
somebody?
We've gone out to bid twice. The original bid was for, we asked for a traditional build or a prefabrication.
How old is that bill?
That one
That
is
quote?
probably, that one's 2 years old now.
Okay, so with inflating costs right now, it's probably going to be.
That was the original one. So we received and we had to take that quote. The problem is the process. We receive all the bids back. We have to send them off to the State Historic Preservation. That took forever. When it was returned to us, they said, this is great, we approve. However, we would like shingles and siding. That matches the carousel. We all agreed to that. We had to go back out to bid again. That's the bid that came in at 495,000. And at this point, that one is just about a year old.
Okay, because contractors aren't holding their prices right now for a year. So we need to get a correct price before we proceed, I think.
And
need
we
to
were
know the
supposed
numbers.
to go back out to bid again, but the concern was focusing on the first round of stabilization, getting that secured and done, which we have now.
But that additional, so it's 300 to complete the,
The stabilization.
well, it could be up to 300. That's not like an exact number, correct?
No, 300 is a rough estimate. What people need to understand, although that last project was a tough one, this one requires dismantling the carousel. So we have to remove all of the components right down to the mast, which does require uninstalling and reinstalling the electric, which that one is an unknown cost factor until we actually get started.
And that's never been done before, correct? But that
The
electric
has
is,
been
need to know our
updated
numbers.
over the years, but probably not since early 90s.
so you have to expect some type of,
Yeah, we
So
need-
when
we
you
need
say
to know our numbers.
dismantle, you mean another shutdown?
No, this would be done over the winter months. So we
okay.
would close Columbus Day of 2023. And we would get started like right away. Myself and my staff would start to do a lot of the first components, which is removing all of the horses. Then you have to bring in an electrician and then the carousel specialist will come in and take it from there.
Good.
His portion of the project is about 6 weeks and then we put it back together. So we would only be closed for the winter of 2023, which we are closed anyway.
So before I just want a refresher on the unrestricted and the restricted fund balances, right? Because when we talk about the capital fund, we're essentially talking about the unrestricted fund balance per ordinance, correct? All right, so let's walk through this again, because I just want to understand how these numbers break out, because I'm trying to read back through the ordinance again.
So in the general fund, you've got a fund balance of ballpark 15 million. And, okay. So in the fund balance, in the general fund, you have about $15 million. And a portion of that, we'll just, for argument's sake, say half. Half of that you can use for something like this if you wanted to. The other half is restricted and you can't use it unless you meet very specific guidelines.
Rainy day fund.
Now, in the capital fund, the way it works is we have, say, $6 million sitting over here in cash. And if you want to spend something like you'll do an ordinance or a resolution, I want to buy a truck, I want to buy something. So all that, it doesn't, technically it increases your budget, but it's neutral because I'm going to transfer 100,000 for a truck in revenue, and then I'm going to bring the expense over. So both my expenses and revenue will go up $100,000. But it's not like my budget's going up 100,000, so I've got to increase tax.
So starting there, are Our fund balance right now for that is how much money? Currently? WAG,
One?
yeah.
6
All right, 6 million, and all of that is allocated or no? Unallocated, that is completely unallocated. So I guess where I'm heading is, why wouldn't we start the discussion with, and I'm fully behind this idea, right? And behind, likewise, Mr. Murato, I'm also behind your idea of kind of doing garbage collection on some of those projects that we might think we're not going to do. But for the purposes of this budget, why wouldn't we just allocate the balance needed for this project from that balance fund?
Correct. That way we don't have to raise this one.
Right, and we can still do the other exercise, but this can get done and the money can be there.
Correct.
Okay.
And
But is
and
that the
does,
balance?
Hmm?
Is that the balance? Because
Yeah, what Malcolm just told me is that the
no,
balance.
no, I mean for the project itself, not for what we have in the,
you have to go out to rebid, Tracy? Are you confident that the 300 and
The, I'm sorry.
She's got two
Commissioner.
different projects. Yep.
Right, so the. project-
stabilization we're talking?
I am looking to ask for 300,000 from the capital budget for the stabilization project.
And that was through a bid process? That you got that figure?
Correct. This is from discussing it with the carousel specialist, what we would be looking at, what we could encounter.
So I think what President Brito is saying is, a lot of things that have been delayed, the prices have gone up.
and it's a discussion. You don't have a quote, an estimate.
Correct.
It was just a conversation. Roughly, it's 300,000.
No, it's like a firm number. And excuse me, and I did just go over all of this with him when he was with us in July.
Can he provide you with a quote on it then?
Yep, we have a quote for a lot of things. What is missing is unknown components when you go to unbolt things, if you have to, if the
Just
bolts.
to give
do
us a
not-
number, like if it's 300,000, if he can give you that 300,000. Right now, it seems like it's a conversation. Yeah, it's gonna cost about.
I can
Contract.
get, if you are looking for something in writing from him, I can. It will be less than the 300,000 because it does not include the electrical. That has to be done by a licensed electrician.
Right, couldn't you get a price on there, as a sub?
I could,
You could
well,
have a sub come out, or you can have somebody come and look at it.
yep, we work with 2 electricians at the carousel, so I can talk.
Because I hate to say, 300,000, which I'm all for this, but then you come back later on and say, oh, it was another 150,000 because we started off with 150, now we're up to 300.
No, the
gonna be-
request was always 300,000 with the hope of also getting $150,000 grant. And just like with this, the last phase 1, I requested money from capital and I had the Carousel Commission also put money forward. He came in under budget. And that's what I'm hoping to do here.
And I wouldn't even count on the 150, to be quite honest with you. If it comes in, it's gravy, it's great. I would go with the number that you're looking for, period.
That's why I'm asking for 300,000.
I
And
think
just,
the 300,000 is with the cushion of the electrical and any unforeseen
Correct.
issues that come in.
Correct.
so two questions remaining. One, the unencumbered fund that we're talking about, Malcolm, does that also mean something that hasn't been started yet? Is it the same, one and the same, unencumbered, not started? I wouldn't want to see us, we're in the middle of something and say, well, we're not going to finish it because we're going to take some of those monies. We're talking about unencumbered and it has not been started yet.
No, every year the council approves a budget of say 3 million.
Right.
And so that comes right off. So if you look at the budget, we probably have 12 million that's somewhere in the process. Some of them have been started, but I don't, all that 12 million, even though it hasn't been spent, that's all encumbered because the council's approved that money. So this.
So the 6 we're talking about
Right, it's
roughly.
just sitting by itself and the council's not appropriated anything.
We haven't broken ground on it.
Correct.
Okay, that's a good
That's
point.
the cap.
Right. So we're not talking a lot of money here out of the 6 million to get this carousel done, right? Stabilization, as Councilman suggested, we're not talking. And my second part is, we're not voting on anything tonight, right? So what's the process here? We just
We're gonna.
let you know.
Do an ordinance.
Right, so you have to wait until we, obviously you
two
have to
council
wait
meetings.
anyway.
So Malcolm, can you get us a list of those projects as well? A list of the projects
That are
we-
encumbered.
That are encumbered.
So what I did was I sent Bob and Nate an email from Dylan from 2 years ago when I posed that question. And he highlighted and gave me his advisory opinion and broke it down, explaining exactly how and when you can repurpose that money. So you have that email I can send to you also. And I'm going to reiterate, I'm asking for, and I'm actually going to increase that by a little bit because it seems like there may be a little bit more that needs to be done. So 150, it's 300,000 to complete the carousel, but 150 is already being proposed in this budget. So what I'm asking is 150 from the previous budget for that project. And I'm going to go 225 for Blunt, just to have a little bit of a cushion on that. Also from the previous budget. So that's 325 total.
Thank you.
375, right?
I'm sorry, 375 with the, from the previous budget, and that's counting that this 150 will also pass when we get to the capital section of the budget.
Can you get us a quote also? That way, because if they come in higher, we're underestimating.
Tracy, one last question. I think we've got a good solution here, but this might be for another day, but what we're calling the Blount building, right? It's our building. It'll be the city building. We're building it. We own it. Is there a lease process? How is it? And everyone loves Blount, including me. So that's okay. But how does that work? What about if Acme Company says, well, I'll give you a bid and, we'll come in and we'll do the same thing, but give you more money? Or are we getting money from Blount, or is this just a service for the people who attend activities there?
So first, it is definitely a city building. It will have a clam shack, an office, a garage, and bathrooms. The restaurant component is leasable space. The current leaseholder gets first option, if you will, per their lease to continue with us. So every time their lease comes due, they have the first option to continue their lease. The city and the council, of course, review increases to their rent or made, things like that. So that's how that works.
They're still paying, even though they're not.
They are not, because we cannot give them a suitable building. And the space is just not usable. So they have not paid this current year's lease. However, they did pay last year, even though they were only there a half a year, which is a very important point I'd like to make. We need the clam shack there. It is good for us. Our customers come, they eat, they stay. However, the clam shack needs us there as well. And that was seen last year when they tried to open when we were not open. The flow of people is just not there. So it's very important that we don't lose track and still make the carousel the priority. Now, that being said, there is a proposal from Blount to continue with their lease with suitable space, and they would make improvements to the inside space of the restaurant. We would only be providing 4 walls and a roof for them.
And just to add something, I mean, I go to Portugal all the time, and this concept is not new. Something that they do in Europe all the time. Government owns a building, business comes in, they refurbish it, and they pay rent for using that business.
And it's how it's been done with the smaller building, with a lot of the past tenants. We do not have the funding to do the type of maintenance that the restaurant building would require. So we would make an agreement with the leaseholder. They would make those improvements, would get an extended lease.
I'll just point out just quickly, since we're there, you made the point, Otto, ARPA money can be used for not this effort, right, in particular, but for very similar, right? If the city decided we want to buy that building and do a very similar thing, ARPA money could be used that way. So that's when I get kind of touchy about ARPA money because it can be used in a way that capital money and city money can't. And it can really change things strategically. So I get a little nervous every time I see some ARPA money pop up here on a sewer contract and some ARPA money pop up, right? Because before you know it, that's gone and we've lost all those transformational opportunities. For this particular thing, I mean, all the numbers that we just tossed out here tonight, I'm behind that 100%. And I don't even particularly care if it comes from unallocated capital or if we find a way to squeeze it from projects that are defunct. Either way, it is not going to impact the current year's taxes, tax levy, and it needs to get done. And you can see, right? I mean, just assume that if people knew that they didn't have to wait in line, how many more people would you have there? And you've gone from what was the ride rate before? It was like 50 cents and now it's $2 or right? Did I track that correctly? Yeah. And you're not seeing anybody going, oh my God, $2, right?
Not usually, no. And we do also, we also have programs for people who maybe struggle to make $2. So
Sure. But $2 is a reasonable rate to ride up 100 and what is it, 30 years old?
127 this year.
Thank you for voicing that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more.
Or it's after 9 now. Are we really gonna stay and do the rest of this?
No, it's only city council budget.
If I can make a recommendation of moving that to the next meeting, because
I'm for that.
my brain.
Don't
is,
wanna-
uh,
I don't.
So you want to do a budget session
into it.
just for city
Fine.
council on Wednesday?
Well, is it this?
It's
Tuesday, next week.
today's Thursday. No, the 14th is Wednesday at 6:30. So
All
you
right,
would
that's fine. That's-
only have city council.
Anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
Wait a minute, there's only one more budget item to discuss?
Yeah, city council.
Can we put that on the budget? I know.
Council.
You want to put on the council meeting?
And so we don't need that Wednesday meeting then.
It's up to you guys.
I say put it on the
On
agenda.
the council meeting. That's what I was just going to say.
So you're not, okay, as long as you're not gonna make changes.
Yeah, council meeting. All right. We have a motion. Or you all want to say more? We're done.
Motion to adjourn.
All right, there we go.
I second that. That's all I need to hear.
Deputy Clerk, may we have a roll call vote?
Yes, sir. Councilman Cahoon,
Yes, please.
Councilman Morato, Council Vice President Rodrick,
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza,
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye.
Tracy, that
I'd have a lawyer look